Welcome to The World This Week with me, Gavin Lee, the Swiss Army knife of journalism, according to Grok. I'll be analysing the last 7 days of global events and distilling them into 45 minutes with a panel of 4 distinguished international correspondents. And the podcast version of the show in the Million Podcast ranking in the top 15 of the world's best 100 current affairs podcasts of 2026. So thank you for watching and for listening. In a week where the stalemate appears to have developed after nearly 2 months of asymmetric conflict between the US and Iran, President Trump's truth socials have been swinging between belligerent maximalism and breezy deal-making. 1 minute suggesting a within-reach deal, and Iranian forces would personally help the enemy confiscate what he called nuclear dust and move it to America. The next moment, threats of nationwide annihilation. No more Mr. Nice Guy, he warned. Meanwhile, hopes for direct talks in Pakistan came and went, and no show on both sides, though there are murmurings of diplomatic activity once again. And Iran's regime-aligned media releasing a new AA propaganda video entitled Goodbye Oil, an ominous but now familiar Lego-style cartoon warning threatening to devastate the Gulf states if Washington resumed their strikes. And President Trump's resumed the ceasefire hours before it was due to expire, and it's no longer time-stamped. Meanwhile, in the Arabian Sea, a de facto double blockade continues, no longer just a war of words, with US forces firing a hole in an Iranian-linked vessel before seizing control of it, and Iranian boats attacking 2 merchant ships and escorting them to the Iranian coast. Every action appearing to have an equal and opposite reaction.
We're rearming. We're retooling and we're adjusting our tactics, techniques, and procedures. There's no military in the world that adjusts like we do, and that's exactly what we're doing right now during the ceasefire.
It's been a week in which Lebanon accused Israel of a war crime, a so-called triple-tap strike, which led to the killing of a journalist and seriously wounding another. Amal Khalil, a reporter with the country's pro-Hezbollah newspaper Al Akbar, and the photojournalist Zainab Faraj had fled their car in the south of Lebanon after an Israeli drone struck a vehicle in front of them. They took shelter in a nearby house, which was then reportedly bombed by an Israeli fighter jets. Lebanese officials alleged the IDF then blocked paramedics in the rescue efforts by using a stun grenade and directing gunfire at the ambulances rushing to help. Israel has denied obstructing the rescue and says it doesn't target journalists. This comes as Israeli and Lebanese officials met for a second round of ceasefire talks at the White House aimed at expanding Israel's 10-day truce with Hezbollah, which has led to a 3-week extension.
I think there's a very good chance of having peace. I think it should be an easy one. Relative to some of the things we're working on, it should be an easy one.
And it's been a week the British Prime Minister can be relieved he's made it through, still standing. Sir Keir Starmer, the man who vowed to steer calmer water in the UK after what he called the chaos, cronyism, scandal and sleaze of the Conservative, is now mired in the same issues on his own doorstep over the lengths he went to ensure that Peter Mandelson was chosen as US ambassador despite his questionable ties to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, and questions remain of why checks and balances were so disregarded in the rush to charm President Trump. An exclusive in The Guardian last week revealing Mandelson hadn't been cleared by the UK security vetting process. Keir Starmer blamed and sacked a Foreign Office civil servant, Sir Ollie Robbins, for not telling him. Only Sir Ollie said it wasn't his job to tell him.
I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right.
I'm afraid the fact that he even had to make the statement today shows how badly he has failed. How badly he has let down the millions of people across our country who are so desperate for change.
We will get to the heart of the omni-shambles later in the show, but first it's time to meet the panel. Joining me on The World This Week tonight, in the studio we have Richard Worley, correspondent for the Swiss media outlet Blick. Good evening to you, Richard.
Good evening.
Author of Cette Amérique qui nous déteste, This America That Hates Us, formerly based in Bangkok, Tokyo, Brussels, Geneva. It is fantastic to have you with us tonight. Let me ask you what you've made of this story this week, the leaked Pentagon email outlining options to punish NATO allies in Europe.
Well, it shows that Spain matters. And what Prime Minister Sanchez is saying matters. Donald Trump so far has treated Spain as it is a non-entity within NATO. He has regretted that Spain doesn't increase its military spending. But the fact that now Spain is at the heart of a kind of European rebellion against the US does matter. And if I would be Prime Minister Sanchez, I would take it as a reward. It proves that this country, with a lot of links with Latin American countries, let's keep that in mind, means something on the map today in terms of saying no to Donald Trump.
Very interesting, but for the UK, being told that they might change their opinion on its claims, its sovereignty over the Falkland Islands, that's pause for thought with the King, Charles, about to embark on a state visit to the US.
Well, I think that is something that probably UK and Spain will continue to talk about. Keep in mind also that both countries, and you know it well, Gavin, have been at odds about Gibraltar for a very, very long time. So when it comes to the relation between Spain and the UK, I'm afraid that it's not going to be rosy for the years to come, and it has quite never been.
Always good to have you with us, Richard, also author of Ball of Illusions, what France believes and what the world sees. Also,
and I thought I would be the Swiss knife, but you are the Swiss knife, so I'm really
we'll have to
disappointed.
double check. Maybe check with Claude or ChatGPT. We can work any lock between us. Let's also bring in the journalist, writer, broadcaster Agnès Poirier, author of the critically acclaimed books Left Bank, Art, Passion, The Rebirth of Paris, and Notre Dame, The Soul of Paris. Good evening to you, Agnès.
Good evening.
Great to see you. Tell us about your week this week, the Swiss Army knife of journalism. You do many things, including writing. And I would like to know about how you kind of manage your writing pattern, because I know you're writing The Right Bank at the moment. Tell me about how you divide your day.
It depends on the news, really. So when the news leaves me alone, which is quite rare, I hunker down and I try to concentrate on. And to time travel, because Right Bank, the book I'm writing at the moment, is set in the 1880s, 1890s, the Belle Epoque. So I like time traveling,
You don't sit there. I mean, Proust, who you were writing, I believe, was famous for sitting up and writing propped up in a cork-proofed bedroom.
Yes, that was slightly later. And my book ends when he starts writing.
And you said to me as you came in, because when we talk about authors and the midst of writing, it seems like you've got a plan sorted. It's not always that easy, is it? You can come in and go, this is difficult right now.
You need to have, your table of contents, your structure before you go on writing. But while you write, it takes a life of its own. And sometimes the characters, I've got about 30 characters, real life characters. And sometimes one takes precedence and leads the way. And you're like, what is happening here?
That is a welcome departure from what's going on, but it is going to be good to have your analysis with us tonight as well. Let's cross over to the channel. Let's go to Stratford-upon-Avon, where I'm delighted to welcome back to the programme John Sweeney, investigative journalist, broadcaster, author of Killer in the Kremlin and founder of the VPDFO Festival in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin, do something off. Great to have you back with us, John. What are you doing in Stratford, first of all?
The other day, I watched a wonderful play, which is perhaps touches on our future here. It's called, by the way, can you hear me? I can hear an echo. It's
Even in the rafters,
very good.
on the cheap seats.
The play is Bertolt Brecht's The Resistible Rise of Arturo Ui. And at the very end of it, Mark Gatiss, who did a fantastic performance as the Chicago vegetable entrepreneur Arturo Ui, who's really Hitler, says, he comes out of character and says directly, the bitch that spawned this bastard is on heat again. And that's the end of the play, and the theatre goes black. And there was a gasp from the audience as we all thought, there's an echo from history right there.
Well, John, you always bring us something new. We'll get on to something else that's coming back to Stratford a little later in the programme. Also want to ask you about something a little birdie, or formerly a little birdie, told me, a.k.a. X. Like Agnès, you're working on a new book too. It's about Nigel Farage. Is there a working title? And what more can you tell us?
I can't tell you the working title, which is inside my little head. But I can tell you, I object to this idea that I'm some part of a Swiss Army knife. That seems unpatriotic. It's St. George's Day the other day. I would call myself a rusty spoon, but I'm not some foreign
the rusty
gimmick.
spoon of journalism. John, delighted to have you and your assessment tonight on another week of global omni-shambles. Let's complete our lineup. Let's head from Stratford-upon-Avon, 1,000 miles or so, to Budapest and bring in the award-winning Hungarian journalist, Veronica Monk. She's one of the most prominent figures in independent media in Central Europe. It is great to see you, Veronica. Welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
It's worth saying Veronica was Deputy Editor-in-Chief at Index, Hungary's largest online news daily, before which she and more than 80 colleagues resigned in 2020 due to external political influence on the outlet. She became the founding editor of Telex, helping build a crowd-funded, fully independent outlet, an estimated 600 to 700,000 daily readers, now Director of Innovation of the leading independent Slovak news outlet, Denik N. Tell us about your week this week, Veronica. Life in Budapest, the end of an Orban era and the Magyar era about to begin.
Yes, you are right. Actually, the last 12 days since the election happened, basically, it's all about that. Like in every conversation in the little corner shops and also in the newsroom, we cover the newly forming government, and we are trying to have interviews with the ministers who are saying goodbye with the Orban era. I'm working for Denik N, which has Czech, Slovak, Hungarian language outlets and also a Brussels-based EU observer. So we covered the Hungarian politics and the Hungarian elections in the last week in a quite heavy matter with analysis and in-depth explanatory articles, because there is quite newsworthy, I think, not just in our region, but also since Viktor Orban and his government had quite serious impact on the European Union level. Every country, we feel the attention and we try to feed with news and explanations that how this newly forming Hungary will change on the European level.
Well, we'll get on to one of those key aspects of his impact in the programme. Great to have you on board tonight as well, Veronica. Let's get started. Let's begin. Tuesday night at 10:10, Washington, D.C., hours before the US ceasefire with Iran was due to expire. President Trump announcing on Truth Social that the truce was being extended. Quote, based on the fact the government of Iran is seriously fractured, he said. Not unexpectedly so, and upon the request of Field Marshal Asim Munir, his favourite Field Marshal, and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, we've been asked to hold the attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders have come up with a unified proposal. I've directed our military to continue the blockade. We remain ready and able, and therefore extend it until such time as proposals are submitted and discussions are concluded, one way or another. So, as things stand, there is a truce without a time limit on it. The threats of bombing Iran back to the Stone Age and ending Iranian civilization has disappeared for now. The standoff is uneasy. Iran's chief negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, has accused President Trump of tricks, lies, says Iran won't negotiate for peace until US blockades of Iranian ports are lifted, while the White House said it won't lift its blockade until a peace deal is agreed with Tehran. All the while, merchant ships still at risk of being attacked, boarded, seized if they operate around the Strait of Hormuz. Richard, to begin, is the US, would you categorise it as being in a quagmire right now?
Yes, as we talk, but it might change, and we will see what's going to happen in the coming days. But as we talk, what we are witnessing is a naval armada in the Persian Gulf and a regime in Iran, which is not ready to capitulate. And that's what Donald Trump wants. It wants Iran to capitulate, to completely surrender. So I don't think that we are witnessing the surrender of Iran at the moment. So considering the amount of force that Donald Trump has displayed and what he said, his words, he wanted a surrender, and we are not going to have it, it seems. So he's going to enter a difficult time, Donald Trump, because whatever he said was not pro-negotiation. He wanted to break the regime in Iran. He wanted to break the neck of this regime, and so far he has not succeeded.
John, there is, well, as we speak, Iran's foreign minister turning up in Islamabad. He's just about to arrive. The stage set, it seems, for some kind of talks, depending on who with. We're told from CNN, Reuters, others, that the two key envoys, it seems, for all things war, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, are on their way as well. What are you making of the choreography?
Well, personally, I'm hoping when the king goes over to the United States in a few days' time, he actually he takes it back, and the Americans repent their great mistake of 1776 because they've elected a fool, maybe not just a fool, a moron, in Trump. He's made a catastrophic error of judgment. The Iranian regime is far stronger than he understood, and they're not going to back down. And effectively, they've got a kind of economic nuke which they can use. Now, the weird thing about nuclear weapons is that no one's used them since the Americans against the Japanese, I think with good reason, but you don't use those. But this thing the Iranians can do is they've shut down oil traffic and gas traffic through the Gulf, and that is crippling the international economy. Now, the markets, I think, in my view, are too optimistic. But essentially, Trump needs to eat his words. He needs to eat humble pie. And he's so arrogant that I don't think he gets it. But the solution to getting the oil flowing again, and he needs to do that politically, and the whole world needs that economically, is for him to eat humble pie. And he's incapable of doing so.
It's an interesting point, listening to John on humble pie, because President Trump's approval rating's falling below 40%. This is according to NBC. It's his lowest in his second term, 37%, in fact, according to NBC. There's also a poll by AP that says 57% of Americans say military action has gone too far, and yet around 2/3 of Americans say they want the US to deal with the nuclear threat from Iran. Almost counterintuitive to everything else we've heard. 8 out of 10 Republicans, particularly, say the most important aspect, compared with about half of Democrats, is to remove the threat of nuclear weapons. So voters unhappy, and yet the job isn't, as they see it, done.
Well, it's not done, and I fear this is going to be very long, that war. Because, I mean, if we're talking about the sticking points and what should be done for negotiations, we're talking about nuclear enrichment. We're talking about sanction relief. We're talking about the fate of Lebanon. We're talking about freedom of navigation. We're talking about Iran's proxies, the Houthis and Hezbollah. And this normally would take years to get to an agreement. And that's actually what happened when we, 3 years, I think it was, to get the agreement that Trump in 2018 just, blew apart. And the thing is, the world cannot wait that long, because exactly as John said, the guns may be silent at the moment, but the economic warfare continues. And already, there's going to be jet fuel shortages very soon. Farmers and the price of fertilizers is adding pressure, and very soon on food prices. And of course, energy prices. So, this is, we can talk about the fog of war. This is the fog of ceasefire. And neither is capable or doesn't or wants to take the risks that a decisive victory would require. That is to say, an open-ended regional war for the US with grounded, forces on the ground, or Tehran would need a confrontation that would probably blow up the regime. So they are playing that game of, pretending there's there's a pause in the fighting for the markets. The markets are happy, but then we're really risking an accident, like a naval accident, or it's going to be sort of low intensity, long-term ceasefire and with flare-ups, and it could last for a very long time.
You remind me of something. Tom Sharp, who should be on the programme soon, is the former Navy commander, British Navy commander, had commanded a fleet in the Persian Gulf, said when it goes wrong, and they've wargamed this, it goes wrong quickly. And that is clearly a fear. Richard, I want to mention Connor Stringer. He's a Telegraph chief Washington correspondent. He said this, according to his sources this week: President Trump is relying on instincts and a tight circle of loyalists who shaped and in some cases soften the picture of war. Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, expressing concern that aides are giving a rose-coloured perspective of this war. And he continues, Connor, to say the sources inside the White House say no one in the administration seems to know what's going on, that it's a cluster, ...
Well, that's probably true, because the editor of the Telegraph has not been the only one to say so. We had the chance to read a lot of articles in the American media telling the same story, telling that Donald Trump is completely isolated. He has around him only courtesans. He doesn't have advisors. He doesn't have experts around him. He has people who tell him what he wants to hear. Now, in addition to that, is the fact that Donald Trump continues to believe that his way of doing it, his way of conducting the war, is going to bring results. So he doesn't have this sense of self-criticism who could bring him to adjust the strategy. He continues to believe that he has the biggest hammer, and the simple fact that he banged the hammer on the table will be enough for Iran to collapse. And I believe that either very naive or very stupid.
Veronica, we heard from Agnes a short while ago just talking about the wider impact, fertilizers, food, energy. Just take us to Central America, different countries in terms of exposure from the crisis in the Gulf. I know there's been a structural shift in energy, particularly from Russia in the war in Ukraine, Poland, Czech Republic, and lesser where you are in Hungary, of course. But what are you noticing? What's gone up in price? Petrol, what are you seeing in terms of food? Any difference?
Yeah, the petrol prices are up a little bit. In Hungary, there is a price cap on petrol right now, arranged by Viktor Orban's government. But yeah, it is like the food inflation is quite high in the region. So we there is an impact what is happening in the hormones. And I think the underlying tensions, I think the problem is that those underlying tensions haven't gone anywhere. So the problem will not be solved. They've just simply shifted into a more opaque phase where signaling matters as much as substance. So I think this isn't just about blockades in the traditional sense. It's about control and economic pressure, which even is feelable in so far away like Central Europe or any part in Europe. And I think the real risk is the miscalculation, as my colleague already said before me, like a proxy clash or a naval incident. And I'm coming from this country where an autocrat leader ruled the country for 16 years. So I have this deja vu when I'm seeing this conflict that like when the leader, like Trump, saying one thing a day and the same day saying another thing, and how this uncertainty can affect the markets and the general economics of a country. So I think the ceasefire may actually be the most, even, I mean, it's not a more dangerous phase, obviously, when there is an actual fire, but still, I think it's very, very dangerous, and we just really, it's really uncertain the longer effects on us, globally speaking.
Very interesting, John. We talk as though there is a kind of momentum, a panic, a sense of what happens next. And yet, as we finish the programmes on a Friday, John, often at the weekend, we see the optics of indifference from President Trump. He's playing golf, he's going to watch the UFC fighting. And kind of put the supporters' view to you, which is that there is masterful game playing here, that Iran, because of its blockade, at some stage, it will basically stop the oil coming in, and they will feel it far sooner than the US will. That this is, we keep hearing this term, this is five-dimensional chess. It's a multi-layered strategy that we're simply not getting.
Well, when I challenged Donald Trump about his connections with a Russian-born gangster, Felix Sater, in 2013, he said to me, well, maybe you're thick, John. Well, maybe I'm thick, John, or Gavin. But I think that Trump has made a catastrophic mistake. He doesn't understand that actually the Iranians, and this is part of their religious ideology, the Shia faith, is that they accept martyrdom with joy. And so that they are far more willing to sustain economic pain than the United States of America is. And this is already hurting Trump in the polls. I think we're in serious trouble. I don't think these peace negotiations are going to give fruit in any meaningful terms. And so what will happen is the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed for a long, long time, while the world economy heads towards the kind of crash that happened in 1929. I am very, very gloomy about this. And I've been to Iran and I've gone head to head against some of I was there it was a long time ago, 92, but I challenged the governor of the state of Isfahan, the province of Isfahan. Why was it necessary to murder the son of the Anglican Bishop of Isfahan, given the fact there's only like 30 Anglicans in the whole country? And they are hard and cruel. It's a hard and cruel regime, no question. But Trump has gone about it entirely the wrong way, and there aren't enough good people around him to say, this is not working, you're wrong, you need to back down. He's too stupid, too belligerent, too conceited to do so. And so for the moment, the world economy is going to hell in a handcart.
Richard, listening to John talking about good people and the views in the eyes of some within the military, they'd say that the Army Chief of Staff, Randy George, was a good person who's asked to retire at the start of this month. And this week, the Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, announced he's going to be leaving the office immediately. There are a number of military chiefs under Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth that seems to be disappearing with little explanation given. What are you making of that?
Well, I think Trump and his Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, simply don't accept any opinion which counter their views. I mean, anybody, even an army officer, even an army general with a lot of stars, coming to them and saying, sorry, sir, you are wrong. Your strategy is wrong. We are not going to get the result we want. They simply don't accept it. So they organize the new lineup of the army with people who are basically yes men. Now, the question I have, and I do not have the answer, is how long can you be a yes man in the United States Army as it is, because it is still a democratic country and it is still an army that has a lot of experts within, and they see what's going on in the ground. So keep in mind that the basic assessment of Trump at the beginning was the Venezuela syndrome. He saw that the Iranian regime would fracture and part of the regime would come towards him and say, please, Mr. President, we beg you to organize something together. That did not happen. So I'm afraid Trump and his closest people, Pete Hegseth being one, J.D. Vance being another one, J.D. Vance against the war since the beginning, though, they are not ready to take it as Iran will not capitulate. Iran will not surrender. And that's the key point. If Iran does not surrender, then what can be the result? And keep in mind, we had an agreement. We had an agreement enforced in 2015 about the nuclear program of Iran. So it brings us back 10 years or 15 years, even 20 years, 20 years back with no results.
President Trump says he wants a better agreement than Obama. That seems to be one guiding light, perhaps, for us to bear in mind as well. Good point as well. The hubris trap keeps coming up. The hubris trap around Venezuela. President Trump doesn't say anymore. He wants to find the equivalent of Delcy Rodriguez, does he, within Iran? That's long gone. Let's move to the UK, where Prime Minister Keir Starmer's career stands in the balance again this week over allegations he's committed a cardinal sin in politics, knowingly misleading Parliament. It is written in the ministerial code that if it is the case, then a leader must resign. It was the downfall of Boris Johnson over so-called Partygate in 2022. On Monday, Sir Keir stood before Parliament to make his case about what he knew when he decided to appoint the Machiavellian media manipulator Peter Mandelson to the most senior and sensitive of ambassadorial jobs to Washington to be, quote, some insiders say a Trump whisperer. Well, last week, The Guardian broke the story Mandelson had not been cleared by the necessary UK security vetting process last January. This is where the misleading claims come in. Starmer said last year all due diligence, checks and balances had been followed. And he said to the Commons that he hadn't been told, landing the blame firmly on the shoulders of Ollie Robbins, the highest civil servant in the Foreign Office, who he forced to resign.
What I set out to the House on Monday is that Foreign Office officials granted security clearance to Mandelson against the recommendation of UK security vetting. Yesterday, Sir Ollie Robbins was asked if he shared that decision with me, Number 10, or any other ministers. He gave a clear answer, no. Mr. Speaker, that puts to bed all the allegations levelled at me by those opposite in relation to dishonesty.
Well, Robbins, in his own words, was deeply upset and appeared before a parliamentary committee managing to joke when thanked for his time, saying he had nothing in the diary anyway. He went on to say Number 10 had a dismissive approach towards vetting and the urgency Sir Keir is now showing over the right to know was not there then. Quite the opposite. There was a pressure to appoint Mandelson to just get effing on with it, is how an email from the Cabinet Office seemed to have made clear. Well, Mandelson's own nickname for himself was the Prince of Darkness. Sir Ollie Robbins' nickname was Sir Humphrey. After the BBC's Yes Minister programme, he was a stickler for detail. He said he knew the ministerial code as well as others did the Bible, and it wasn't his job to tell the Prime Minister. He also claimed that his office had been asked about another potential political appointment. Starmer had wanted to give a job to his former spin doctor, Matthew Doyle, an ambassadorial post, but not to tell the Foreign Office of the plan. Matthew Doyle's since been suspended from the parliamentary party over links to a convicted paedophile in a separate case. Keir Starmer later confirmed to the Commons that was the case. He said, when people leave roles in any organisation, there are conversations about other roles they want to apply for, but nothing came from it. John, this is a complicated week. I want to quote Monty Python's Black Knight. "'Tis but a scratch on the Prime Minister. How many arms, how many legs has he got left?"
Oh, good question, Gavin. Good question. There's an old friend of mine who's passed away, Paul Vickers, and for a time, I think in the early 90s, he shared a flat with Keir Starmer. They lived. This is true. It's in. There's a version of it in the official biography of Keir Starmer. They lived above a brothel in a dodgy area of North London. And one day a burglar came in and stole the television of the flat. And Keir's in the flat, but he's defending some vegetarians who are having a go at McDonald's. And he's defending the veggies, and he's so hyper-focused on writing his brief for the vegetarians who were being sued by McDonald's. He didn't notice that the telly was being nicked by a burglar. And that story kind of sums up Keir Starmer, because there is a lack of curiosity. He's supposed to be the bloody Prime Minister, the person with the most, the best political antennae in the entire country. And it feels like he never looks over to see what's happening on the other side of the fence. And that's a serious problem in terms of understanding political intelligence. Having said that, another civil servant has given evidence to say she wanted to know what was the result of the vetting of Mandelson, and there was 2 red flags, and actually not about Epstein. This was about him. The story that's appeared in the papers, so therefore it must be true. Is that the number one, the most important client of Peter Mandelson's global counsel outfit, his PR company, was a Chinese company linked to the Chinese People's Republic Army, so the Chinese military. Now, that's appalling. And that's the reason why they turned it down. And I think, to be honest, it's unreasonable for Ollie Robbins not to have told the Prime Minister or the Cabinet Office that simple fact. It doesn't make sense to me. And there is a wide. Now, listen, I have never liked Peter Mandelson, and my old and great news editor on The Observer, Paul Routledge, used to clash with him all the time, and I've kind of inherited that instinct. And for my podcast related to my book, Hunting Galen, I phoned up Peter Mandelson sometime in 2020 and said, I want to talk to you because you're in the book, Epstein's Black Book. Your number's there several times. And Mandelson said, I'm terribly sorry, John. I'm on a Zoom. Could you possibly bear to call me back in half an hour? And I call him back, no answer, no answer. He never gets back to me. So the idea that this creepy, horrible Mephistopheles figure should be made our ambassador to the United States, huge mistake. Keir was wrong to do so. And there's a lot of lack of political intelligence. But the big picture is, I think Starmer has got Trump's stupid war against Iran wrong. I think the detail, he'll come out of it. I think he'll get away with it. So the answer to your question, Gavin, is he's lost his arms and his legs, but he's still alive and spouting.
Well, the fall guy for now is Sir Ollie Robbins. And yes, there are huge questions about the vetting process, why Mandelson was announced before the full vetting process was done, and also that gave him, we are now finding out, access to highly classified government documents. So it's got national security implications as well. And yet it's not over for Keir Starmer. There's more evidence by his former chief of staff coming next week.
Yes, but as John said, I mean, Keir Starmer is surviving, but not, I mean, so far he's survived this, but not because he's strong, but because there hasn't been strong enough a political event to actually bring him down. But the pressure is adding, though, because the problem for Starmer started almost immediately after his extraordinary victory and, more than 400 MPs, etc. But that was in July, and 2 months later, he was already, the electorate was already very disappointed in him, and it went from bad to worse, because first of all, it looked as if he didn't have really a plan, nor any convictions, so he veered right and left. He went to see Giorgia Meloni, about immigrations, he wasn't talking about setting up hubs in Rwanda, but in Albania. And, he kept doing this, cancelling laws and then, coming back on his word. And I think the test will be the 7th of May local elections, because according to the polls, it's going to be disastrous for Labour. So it's a question of degree in the disaster looming, because Labour is going to lose seats to Reform, to the Greens, to nationalists in Scotland, in Wales, and perhaps even to the Tories. And so from that moment on, from the 7th of May, because the cabinet, his cabinet has already had enough. So it won't be a question of if he goes, but who to replace him. And it better, plan an orderly transition and plan exit before the party conference in the autumn.
And the bookies are already taking bets. I think Angela Rayner seems to be odds-on favourite at the moment.
Plenty. I mean, they have time to bring back Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester mayor. There's Ed Miliband, who's got some experience. Angela Rayner, of course, his former deputy. Wes Streeting, who is just dying to be the next Prime Minister. He's very young, 43, I think, and the health minister. So it's not lack of candidates for the job.
Richard, they'll be desperate to get on a European stage. Can I ask you, if we were to say goodbye to Sir Keir Starmer, would he be missed in Europe?
I don't think so. I don't think so, for a simple reason. Since he has won the election with a large majority, as it was explained, he has not, viewed from the rest of Europe, he has not scored any major success. He lacks any major success to appear as a leader that you can embark with. He's got good initiatives with Macron on the latest one being on Hormuz, but Hormuz after the war. So that is really blurry, if I may say. But I think Starmer has two problems to be seen as a European leader. First of all, We do not know yet, really. I do not know exactly his position on Brexit. I mean, he has remained on that blurred line. He is negotiating. I mean, there will be a final agreement with the UK for sure. But we still do not know yet what he thinks about Brexit, and that's a problem. And the second difficulty is that he doesn't have an authority. And that story proves it, because he now target the civil servant, which is a very bizarre way for a leader. Normally, if you are a leader, you take it for yourself. And frankly speaking, I'm not familiar enough with British politics, but I thought that it was a good idea to have Mendelssohn in the US, because Mendelssohn being a super lobbyist, I have known him as commissioner in Brussels. I thought it could have been a good idea. What I did not know is what was behind the door, and that Starmer apparently did not look at it or did not want to see it.
Or didn't see it. Maybe he felt what you felt and thought there was something to do with it. He should have listened to John right at the start. Yeah. I'm also minded about the Yes Minister, just listening to John as well, when we were talking about the fact that he hadn't failed, he hadn't passed, hadn't cleared. This is very British diplomatic language here. This is very Yes Minister. He was, quote, borderline, pointing towards denial. That's the way the civil service phrased it. OK, to Ukraine, Wednesday morning, a press conference in Kyiv. President Zelensky is asked about the veracity of a New York Times article after it was claimed this week that Ukrainian negotiators had proposed to rename part of Donetsk, quote, Donnyland, in honour of President Trump, trying to appeal to his vanity to get him to take a firmer stance against Russia. Well, Zelensky replied indirectly, saying as long as it's not Putin land and the territory remains Ukrainian, that's the most important thing. And then the big news for Ukraine on Thursday. It was confirmed by the EU a €90 billion loan is finally going to go ahead, much needed to keep the wolf from the door in its defence against Russia for the next 2 years. John, money unlocked for Ukraine. It's a place you know very well. How close to desperation has Ukraine been in needing this money? And what will it mean?
Oh, it's a massive boost, because you fight wars with blood and treasure. And the Ukrainians are running out of blood. They're running out of people to fight for them. The people at the front line are exhausted. I heard actually somebody here in Stratford-upon-Avon, they've got friends, a Ukrainian family they're looking after, but the husband who'd been injured was being sent back to the front lines. So the Ukrainians are in trouble in personnel. The way round that is to use drone war. And now there are more and more, and the Ukrainians are world leaders in this technology, military drones. And and the other day, they took a stretch of the front line by robots alone. So what they're doing is these are machine guns on a drone that goes in, and the Russians are surrendering to robots. This is the future. By the way, hardly anyone in the West, certainly in America, also in Britain, truly gets the way the war has been revolutionized by drones. But this $90 billion, which was gummed up because of the Kremlin's patsy in Budapest, he's gone. Good. And that means that this money is going to be incredibly useful, first of all, in propping up the Ukrainian economy, which is in trouble. But secondly, it's the treasure which will help Ukraine stay on in the war. To be honest, though, they've been doing very well. They have ingenuity, and they have daring, and they have courage on their side, and right too. Russia, I think, is in trouble. And the problem with Trump's stupid war in Iran is the great beneficiary of this is Vladimir Putin. And you know, quietly, the Americans have said, by the way, those sanctions against Russia, Russian oil companies, we're not pressing with those things. We're dropping them. And these things are never announced properly or clearly, but that's happening behind the scenes. And the Ukrainians, as a result, have been going and drone bombing some of the big oil refineries that Russia's got facing Europe. So for the moment, this $90 billion dollars is a great shot in the arm for Ukraine. Good.
A great shot in the arm for Ukraine. As John just mentioned, Hungary was the blocker in chief of the money going to Ukraine. Things have changed, to quote Bob Dylan. And quickly too, post-election defeat for Orbán, as you said right at the top. Tell us about the position now for the next Prime Minister, Peter Magyar, in terms of his relations with Putin and with Ukraine. Which way is it heading?
Yeah, you are right. Hungarian government blocked one of the implementing legal acts. So at the first, basically, they approved with other member state leaders, but then they blocked it because the Ukraine became one of the most important narratives of the Hungarian election campaign. So basically, Orban was influencing the society, talking about the war, saying that if people doesn't vote for Fidesz, then our sons will die in Ukraine. And it became quite harsh. So everything related to Ukraine became a Hungarian local political issues. And basically, the outgoing Hungarian government made its approval conditional on the resumption of oil deliveries through the Druzhba pipeline, carrying Russian oil through Ukraine to Hungary and Slovakia. And just yesterday, the oil is already arriving again, and therefore the 90 billion euros already approved, just like John said. And about the new Prime Minister Peter's Magyar approach about Ukraine is of course different than Orban's, but at the same time, this new Prime Minister, soon to be Prime Minister, we have like 10 days until the new government is legally forming. He's a conservative. He used to be part of the Fidesz universe, but at the same time, he is a pro-EU, pro-NATO kind of politician, and he said several times that he considered Russia as the aggressor, and he said that Ukraine's defense is legitimate. At the same time, he considered a more modest non-leading role for Hungary, which means that he stressed that Hungary has virtually no meaningful influence over the outcome of the war. He also stated in this long press conference he had that the fast track of Ukraine's EU accession will be not supported by Budapest.
That's very interesting. We are going to be beaten by the headlines at this point, but Veronica, thank you. And thank you all of you tonight. A fantastic panel. More than a century worth of on-the-ground reporting, collectively that AI can only dream of if it learns to dream. Well, Grok, Claude, ChatGPT might talk the talk, but they cannot walk the walk. In the studio with me, the journalist, broadcaster, writer, Agnès Poirier. Thank you, author of the critically acclaimed books, The Left Bank, Art, Passion, Rebirth of Paris and Notre Dame. Thank you, Agnès.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Richard Worley, the correspondent for Blick, Swiss media outlet, the author of C'est Amérique qui nous déteste, It's America That Hates Us, The Ball of Illusion, What France Believes and What the World Sees. Merci, Richard. London, thank you, John Sweeney, investigative journalist, broadcaster, author of Killer in the Kremlin and more. Thank you, John. Have a great weekend in Stratford and in Budapest. Thank you to the award-winning Hungarian journalist Veronica Monk, director of innovation at Denik N. Thank you, Veronica, as well. Thank you for watching. Talking of what is said and the way it is said, it is the anniversary celebrations of William Shakespeare this week, whose presumed birth and death day are commemorated on the 23rd of April. 462 years since he was born. He was 52 when he died. I'll leave you with this week, the words of Kenneth Branagh, who's returning to the RSC in Stratford next month for the first time in 30 years, playing Prospero in The Tempest. In a Sky Arts special called Tea with Judi Dench, he talked of Shakespeare as the go-to, in this instance in a time of a friend's loss, when words might sometimes fail us. 1,000 times good night. We'll see you in 7 days for The World next week.
And I said, so there's this line in Hamlet where he simply says, he thinks I saw my father. I saw him once. He was a goodly king. And Hamlet says, he was a man. Take him for all in all. I shall not look upon his like again.